Hi, this is Greg Shields, and I'm going to spend a minute with the Whiteboard today, helping you understand how privilege management, and the whole concept surrounding privilege management, well, they might just actually solve many of those big IT problems that have been plaguing us for so long. First of all, let me draw up here just a regular Windows computer, right? Here's my little icon for a Windows desktop with the computer monitor and then the desktop underneath it. Now, in the typical Windows model, when we're thinking about permissions, right, we have kind of a binary options available to us. We have administrator, and then we have, well, not administrator or a standard user. Now, this probably worked fine in the early days of Windows because, well, we weren't that aware of what permissions we needed, or maybe we just didn't need those levels of permissions way back in the early days of Windows. But as our environments have evolved, and as we've come to understand the isolation of the different roles that different people in our organization may be doing, we recognize that this whole notion of administrator versus non-administrator is just, it's not granular enough to provide the level of permissions that each individual person might need. Now, one of the ways that privilege management desires to fix this problem is by splitting apart this whole concept of admin versus non-admin. I think in the article I used the word splintered or fractured. And by splintering or fracturing admin into its disparate components, we actually can pull those components back together in a much different way to create this whole notion of least privilege. And ultimately, granularly assign the permissions to users for the actions that they need to do. Now, there's three things that we have to have in order to be able to do this. The first thing we have to have is up here at the top, we have to have kind of a catalog, if you will. So this catalog would be a catalog of all the possible actions that any user anywhere might need to do on a computer. This can be things like adding an ActiveX control, or elevating an application, or installing an application, or changing the system time. Just a big catalog of all those things that someone might need to be able to do. The second thing we need to have is, in addition to this catalog, we have to have another little thing over here, and that's kind of a directory of the users. So if I have this directory of users, then I can map the users into the catalog of possible actions. Right? So the users that are in the finance group should be able to do the things that the finance group have been allowed to do. So there's this kind of nice mapping here between, well, who are the users and what are the possible things that they might be able to do. These two pieces alone, however, aren't enough. We have to have a third piece also that really identifies what that mapping should be. And for this, I'll call these the policies. And you probably have your policies in your organization. Maybe they're written down. Maybe they're not necessarily, defined to the level that can be easily or directly mapped into a catalog. But these policies will help define what the mapping is between your users and your catalog. Now, how do these track into actual technologies? Well, that catalog is something that a privilege management solution might provide for you. A good management solution should give you a list of all the possible actions and allow you to create instances of those actions that make sense for whatever your business rules are. Down here, the directory, well, you already have the directory. That's your Active Directory. And the groups and the different global groups that you've created, those actually probably define what the roles are for the different users and what they probably should be able to do. Again, back to the whole finance versus IT versus all the different other groups that are in your organization. Lastly, these policies, again, while they might not be technical in nature, you probably have written policies that determine which users or which classes of users should be able to do what things. So we take the policies, we combine them with your Active Directory groups, and then ultimately a least privileged solutions catalog, and you end up with this nice ability to granularly define what actions which every user in the organization should be able to do. Now that you understand what the privilege management concept is, really using this concept to apply or to solve problems in your organization really is the next step. Now think about this. This catalog of actions can determine things like installing applications. It could be things like elevating applications too. These are two classic things that are associated with privilege management, so elevating here. So when we look at the different files and folders on our system that we can choose as instances to install or elevate, well, we might be able to, for example, use hashing or use certificates that are assigned to different executables to determine, well, whether or not that executable is valid and whether or not it should be installed or elevated or whatever sort of action we need to do. Because we have those hashes, we now have an ability to absolutely and positively verify each potential item on our system, each potential file on our system. Because we have those files now, because we know what the certificates that are tagged to the files and we know what the hashes are associated with those files, we can now bring those files under control. Right? If a piece of malware happens to impact that file or change that file, the certificate's not going to work anymore. The hash isn't going to be the same. If a user tries to update the application with a different version of the application, the same holds true there. Or if they try to install a new application that hasn't been specifically allowed, well, it's not in your list of things that are allowed by virtue of your catalog. So all of these really portend to make privilege management one of those great solutions that could potentially solve a lot of the big problems in your organization today.